Hey, everyone. It's your old pal, John Frensley, and I wanted to show you this Excel document I created called Test Grader that will do some data for you and also generate test corrections documents for you. The first tab kind of shows you everything in words. This video is for my visual learners. So I'm going to take you through the process of inputting test data and generating everything. So here's what it's going to look like. So first I go to the names tab, and this is where I'm going to put in each student's name. I'm going to put in the answers to the multiple choice and a corrections task. You'll find out what that means in a moment. Free response parts, 1A, 1B, 1C, or whatever. The maximum number of points they can get on free response. And again, corrections task for that. And again, I'll explain what that means in a little bit. So when I grade tests, my multiple choice, I use ZipGrade. And so there's a shortcut that I'm going to show you. It's a different document called ZipGrade Converter for TestGrader.xls. And it tells you to just paste in all the data in the download from ZipGrade called full format with student responses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that right here. So this is a test, and I'm not scrolling down so that you can't see my students' names because that's not okay. But if you go here under CSV quiz statistics CSV, you can't see it here because it's cut off, but it says full format with student responses. So you click on that. When you click on that, it generates something that looks like this. Now, these student names have all been made up. So, uh, yeah, so um, there's no impropriety here or anything. Notice I didn't show you the actual download from ZipGrade, which has real student names in it, right? This is real student data with just fake names. So all you do is you just select all. So I just push Control A to select all, Control C copies, and then I come over to ZipGrade Test Converter and literally just paste the whole thing in. Paste the whole thing in, and then on this tab, there's all the names, last name, comma, first name. So I take all the names, and this part is really important. Okay, I just copied that. What you do is you right click and you paste values. You paste values. It's very important that you paste values. If you just paste, you'll ruin the formatting. What you'll notice is that the yellow box has now turned green. On this particular page, and really on every page, the colors mean something. So here, green means that Excel has detected that there is input in that box. So all the yellow boxes are empty. There's nothing wrong with that necessarily. But if you see a box that's green and it looks like there's no text in it, like watch this. Okay. See, all I did was push the space bar and push enter. Excel thinks that there's text in that green box, which means it's expecting a test for student number 93. If you don't put in any data for that test, it will think that this student scored a solid zero and it will factor that into your results. Same thing can happen if you accidentally push a period. I don't know if you can see that little period right there. So basically, if you see a green box on this first sheet names, it's the name of the sheet, and you don't see any text in that box, just push delete over it. um, Same thing goes here. You know, if I push space here, then now Excel thinks that there's text there, and it thinks that that's the answer to question one on version A is empty space. That would mess up what you're doing quite handily. Um, the This Excel sheet called ZipGrade Converter for Test Grader will actually go through all that data from the CSV output, and it can pick out what the key is. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to bring it over here. I'm going to paste this here. We're going to paste values, right? Okay. So it turns green. Now, this Excel document assumes that if you have multiple versions, that each version has the same questions in the same order. So question one is the same question on all four versions. Question two is the same question on all four versions, but the answer choices are scrambled, which is something that Excel can do. If you give different versions where the questions themselves are in scrambled order, then there's no way this Excel document can give you valid data or correctly correlate a corrections task with right and wrong answers or whatever. So, same questions in the same order, but scrambled answer choices is what this sheet assumes if you do multiple versions. Now, what is a corrections task? A corrections task is what the student has to do if they get the question wrong. So if the student gets a question wrong, then what are they going to do, right? What are they going to do as a correction for that, right? So let's see. Um, Let me just open up. So I've written corrections tasks for all of my questions that I've written and for all the AP release questions, right? I haven't really written tasks for anything else. So let's just go to Physics 1, um, 2015 practice exam, and you'll see that the corrections task is actually in the field called note. So if you go to the double click on the question and you go to info, then you see in the notes that's where the corrections task for that question is. That's where I pull them from, right? So if I copy this, I'm over here at test grader, and I just push go up here and paste. Then there's a corrections task there that goes with that question, assuming that question was question one, which it wasn't question one. So anyway, if you don't have exam view, then oh, this is AP Physics 2. Well, whatever. Um, so if you don't have exam view and you're opening my rich text format versions of this, my .rtf versions, then you'll see the little NOT for note, and you can see the corrections tasks there. There's also a index of all the corrections tasks right here, which you'll see on my Google Drive in this folder. And there, it shows you the first question these tasks, some questions have the same task assigned to them if they are very similar to each other. Um, but in this document, they will not show the same corrections task won't appear more than once. So they were culled that way, and it's in order by topic, then subtopic. So you could go down to like I don't know, electric forces and Coulomb's law, and look through these and choose corrections tasks if you want to. Whatever. Okay, so let me show you a screen with completed data on it. So this is all the fake names, and this is the versions here, and the corrections tasks for each question, and then also the free response parts. So the free response parts, I just call them FR, 1A, 1B, 1C. You just call them 1A, 1B, 1 dash A, 1 dash A dot I. It's just whatever you feel like it, okay? You just need to tell it the maximum number of points that can be awarded on that part, and then again, a corrections task for that too. So when you get to the print corrections page, each student is going to have their own set of corrections based on the answers that they got wrong on multiple choice. So if they get 10 out of 20 wrong, then the 10 wrong, make 10 corrections for one for each wrong answer. They'll also have corrections for each free response part they did not get all the points on, right? So here there's 7 free response parts. So if they get a 2 and a 3 and a 1 and a 3 and a 2 and a 4 and a 2, well, I just said what 3 I think parts where they got less than, so those 3 parts they would see those corrections tasks, right? So the idea is that the corrections task is a task that requires the student to use the same knowledge and skills as the question they missed. All right, that's the idea. If you look at the tasks and the questions they go with, you'll see that they're very closely related, but not exactly the same because you're sending the corrections tasks home. If you make the corrections task the exact same as the test, you're sending the test home, which you don't want. But if they test the same objectives as the test, then I mean, it's not the same questions really. All right. So we go on to the next tab, which is called answers. And on the next tab, which is called answers, so here's what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy these over to the one that I'm teaching you from here. Okay. So I'm going to take this. I'm just going to, you know, paste values. Okay. Same over here. I'll just copy these corrections tasks because I do want you to kind of imagine that I'm doing a test right now, right? That's what I want you to imagine I'm doing. Okay, so there is a red blank for every version of the test. You need to put in the test version of the person. But again, I have good news, and that is that my little zip grade converter for the test grader, if you go to answer data, it has all that stuff here for you already. So I can just take all this and just over selecting everything, right? Okay, so I'm going to copy. I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to paste. And if you put in a valid version, which is capital A through capital D, then it will turn green. If it's not valid, it'll stay red. But once you put in a valid version, now boxes light up red for where it's expecting your input. Now, here are the free response parts. You have to put in the free response parts by hand pretty much. I mean, ZipGrade won't scan it for you. 1 and 2 and 0 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 or something like that. Okay, yellow, that they didn't get all the points. If it lights up yellow, they didn't get all the points. They're going to get a correction. So this kid is going to get 4 corrections, right? Green means they did get all the points, and red means you actually entered too much, and that can happen sometimes. It is possible that you accidentally put a 3 where the most they can get is a 2. If that happens, it lights up red. So there you go. So if I make that 0, well, that's not more than the maximum number of points, right? Well, here's the truth here, and that is that I have a bunch of scores here. I'm just going to copy and paste in. Okay, so you would have to type them in individually for each student. I have to do it. Everybody has to do it. But I do have good news, which is that the multiple choice. I mean, why do you pay $12 zip grade every year? Um, on this page of the zip grade converter. Okay, so this is the zip grade converter right here, right? Okay, this is a different spreadsheet. So I copy all that, go back to my test grader, and I can copy, and right click and paste values. Okay, so now that I pasted values under multiple choice, if it's green, they got it right. Yellow, they got it wrong. It's going to generate a correction. Red means that there's a blank there. Well, when that happens for me, I go back and check to see on the zip grade form if maybe they answered something, but me scanning it with the phone, there might have been some glare or something. So I'll just go back and check really quickly and see that they really did omit it. This student obviously omitted a lot. um, I would go back and just double check that. So you put in all your answers. Okay. So all the answers, all the free response there, all the test data is in, all the names, all the corrections, everything. So what time is it? It's time to set your grades. So we go here, you set grades. Now, each section needs a multiplier. Now, for this particular test, the multiple choice, there were 20 multiple choice questions. That is automatically filled in by scanning the number of answers you put in the key. It's everything else is blank. Watch out. Watch what happens if I leave like space bars here, right? Then look what happens on set grades. It thinks there's 21 questions, and that means that all your students are going to get question number 21 wrong and get counted off for that. We don't want that. Okay. So, and then the number of free response points was generated by simply adding these up. It's a computer, so the computer can add things up really quickly. So, what do I want them to multiply by? Well, if I want both parts to be equally weighted, then I might choose weights like 1 and 1, right? So that makes 40 total points. 20 out of 40 is multiple choice. 20 out of 40 is free response. I'm going to put the name of a test here. This is for when you print it out. So for me, I think this is my first test called Newton's first law test. And I'm going to put my name, and you'll see why that is in a moment. Okay, there are 2 methods use to curve the test. One is called the root curve method, and the other one's called the piecewise linear method. So let me show you root curve method. To choose that, you put literally anything in the box. I put an X, but literally anything. So now the one you chose turns green. The other one is blanked out, right? If you choose them both, they'll both turn red. Notice you can't write in most of the boxes, right? So turn red, meaning that you're confusing the program. That's bad. Okay, so what are you doing here? You're going to tell the method the lowest possible grade a student can make. That is, if the student gets 0 raw score points right, what is the lowest they can make? And then what's the highest they can make? If they get every single raw score point, what is the highest grade that you'll possibly give? And then something called a curve index. So for me, if a student gets a 0, I usually say that I will give them a 20. I've never had a student get that low, because even if you're randomly guessing on the multiple choice, you're going to get something. Now, the highest grade I give is a 110. Okay. Now, let's say the curve index is 1. Then what you'll see here, this horizontal axis is the raw score. See, it goes up to 40. The vertical axis is the grade book grade, like the curve score that goes to the grade book. Notice that goes up to 110, right? And then the dots represent each student's score, and the lines represent the quartiles. Red is the lowest, then orange, then yellow. Yellow is the median, orange is the first quartile, and then green is the third quartile, and blue is the highest. So there are a quarter students here, quarter students here, quarter students here, quarter students here, like that, right? Okay, this is the formula right here. L is the lowest grade, H is the highest grade, X is the raw score, Y is the curve score, and R is the number of raw points. So what happens if I make the curve index higher? Let's make the curve index something like 2. Okay, look at what's going to happen. Oh, see, this is like a square root curve. So you see the bottom end kids get a much bigger boost the higher the index is. So if I make the index, say, 3, 4, 5, 6, now you'll notice what's happening is that everyone except the kid who makes a 0 is going to get a pretty high grade. It's probably not going to do that. Normally, when I do it, it's a 1.5. I found that works pretty well. Okay, now what is before C? That's before corrections. Remember, you're going to give the students corrections packets, and they're going to do corrections. And now you need to have a new formula for giving them a curved or bumped up grade curved again after doing corrections. Now, for me, the highest grade is because if someone gets the highest grade, they got everything right. There's not going to be any corrections, right? If I put 1.5 here, and if I change this 20 to a 50, what that actually does is that makes every student get a third of the points back that they got below 110. So, for example, if they had an 80 is 30 below 110. So now they'll get a 90. That's a third of the way to 110 from where they were. If they had a 50 is 60 points from 110. A third of 60 is 20. So give 20 points back to that 50, they get a 70, right? That's the way I do it. I do it this way on every one of my unit tests. You can do whatever the heck you want. But notice once you set the grades, once all the information's there, then you'll see a solid, very thick line that is the before corrections curve, and the thin line is the after corrections curve. And then over here, you can see the thin line is the before corrections curve, and the thick line is the after corrections curve. Your goal is for these two curves never to cross over. There should be no place where the before corrections curve is higher than the after corrections curve. If that were the case, then a student doing corrections would get a lowered grade, which is not what you want. Now, is it? Okay. Over here, you'll see the highest third quartile, median, first quartile, and lowest raw score, raw percent of the possible score points before the curve. So before the curve, somebody's already getting before corrections. I mean, before corrections, someone's already getting a 105, and the median student is getting an 88, and the lowest student's getting a 56. And then after correction, so this highest student probably has like one or two things to correct, they can get a 107. And then the median grade, if everybody does corrections, and the median grade is 95, and then the lowest grade will be 74. Well, this is my first test, so that's probably um, better than my students are going to score on, say, rotation or energy, those things that are really tough, or in my physics C class, Faraday's law and that kind of thing. But you know what? For the first test of the year, I feel like being generous. It makes the students feel better about being in AP Physics, which is a really tough course. Now, what's the last thing you're going to select? The last thing you're going to select going to select which corrections page are you going to use. Now, there are two corrections pages that are available. One of them looks like this. This is the front and the back. They're identical. This is 3 correction spaces on each side. So that's 6 correction spaces to a single piece of front back paper, right? The student writes the correction number here and they do the correction task in this space. What's with the dots, Friendly? The dots make it significantly easier for them to do things like drawing quantitative graphs. So if they have to actually graph like y equals 2x plus 3 or whatever kind of thing, it's very easy to do with the dots in the background. If they don't have to graph, then the dots are small enough so as to not be a distraction, hopefully, or they could use it to write like lines. You know what I mean? So that's the idea there. So there are 6 to a page or there are 8 to a page, right? This is the 8-page version, right? So if you do 8 to a page, that's less space for each student, but it's also less paper if you love, trees, right? Okay. So let's say I go ahead and here I'm going to select 6 per page, then I need to copy 209 of these pages because you know what the Excel document's going to do? It's going to tell me all of the pages that are needed. I mean, like it's going to sum up how many pages are needed by each student. It can make that calculation for you. Now, let me just advise you that it is possible that you have a student not take the test. If the student doesn't take the test, you have some options. One is to fill in their name and their information after the fact, after they take the test, or as you'll see here, um, you'll see that I had like Emma Lee didn't take the test and Caleb DeMarco didn't take the test. So here's what I do. I don't fill in a version for them, and I don't fill in. So you'll see with no version filled in, these are white because Excel is not expecting there to be any test data if there's no version. And those students are not considered students having a zero. They're considered just tests that don't exist. So you're not going to factor in zeros into your medians and quartiles and averages. So just don't put a test version until you get that test data in. Okay, so I need to copy 209 pages. If more students take the test, that'll go up. So maybe I copy 220 or something like that, right? Okay, all good. So then you go to what's called grade details. So this is the raw percentage that each student got. This is their before and after curve corrections grades, before corrections, after corrections, and then like their raw multiple choice free response. When what I do, I'm just going to tell you is I will go back to zip grade and see what zip grade thinks their raw multiple choice is. And I'll probably do that for like every fifth student. And then I'll compare it here. And that's just to make sure that there's no mistakes. There have been times when I've written down or typed in the wrong answer on one of the keys. So everybody who had version D had one less uh, uh, raw multiple choice here than they had on zip grade, so I had to go back and fix it. That's why I do this. In case you write down their raw free response scores, you want to just double check them or whatever kind of thing. This is after the weightings are applied, which are the weightings right here. These two things right here, and then their total raw score, which is a number between 0 and that number right there. Okay, so all good. Now I want to show you another set of sample data. This was from a practice AP exam, so there was only one version, and that was the version I downloaded off of College Board. So here's all the same students, one version, corrections task, you got them all. Okay, here's all their answers. Okay, typical, right? This student obviously ran out of time and didn't bubble in some stuff. You see some other students who skipped around, so there's some red bits, right? Okay, I don't skip spaces when I fill in free response. I'll fill it in with a zero if I have to. Now, notice what I did here. First of all, the MC score and free response score multipliers are zero point 0.8 and 0.88889. And that's because that came off of one of these worksheets, right? The scoring worksheet, right? Okay, so there were 80 total raw points. So I needed to put in multipliers that turned a 50 into a 40 and a 45 into a 40. So how do you turn a 50 into a 40? You multiply by 40 over 50, really. And to change 45 into 40, you multiply by 40 over 45, which is 8 over 9. So you see, I did that way up there. Okay, there's the name of the test. There's my name. This time I use what's called a piecewise linear method. A piecewise linear method basically creates points out of each of these raw and curved pairs and connects them with lines. I don't know if you can see that there. Can you see that there's clearly a line here and then a line here and then a separate line here? It kind of looks like one line, but it's actually five separate lines. Why five? Well, one for a one for a two, one for a three, one for a four, one for a five. Okay, 80, 57, 43, 34, 24, 0. 80, 57, 43, 34, 24, 0. So I just took this right off the scoring sheet of an AP exam. So to me, if you get every single point, that's a 110. And if you get a 5, you're getting at least a 90. And if you get a 4, you're getting between an 80 and 90. And if you got a 3, then you at least pass. And if you got a 2, well, you should get, a 60, you should get a D. And then if you get a 1, then I go all the way down to 20 because you shouldn't be getting a 1 for me. And then I bump up each of them a little bit progressively more. So like, you know, this plus 6 plus 9 plus 12 plus 15 and then plus 40 or whatever to make the after corrections grade. And again, I'm coming over here and I'm like, okay, so before corrections on my practice AP exam, the median student, half of the students are getting 76 or less, but after corrections, half the students are getting 86 or less, or 86 or more. And I'm happy with that. That makes me feel good. And if I do the 6 corrections per page, I got to print out basically 700 of them. And if I do the 8 per page, only about 530 or something like that. Like, but do I want to give them the more? Do I want to kill more trees but give them more space? I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. All right, so that was an example of using the piecewise linear method as opposed to the root curve method, which is what I do for just unit tests, right? Okay, so you see the grade details. You'll see here that Emily never took the test, so it's all blank for her all the way across, right? Okay. Now, if the name of the worksheet says print, it means you can print it. So this is print grade. It's called print grades for a reason. You can push Control P and look at that. It can come out of your printer, right? Now, my printer is way far away from my classroom, right? Because that's the way my school district works. So what am I going to do? I'm going to put in my name under here on the set grades table, Friendly. Yeah, I spelled it correctly, and it appears here. So when it comes off the print, hey, who's this? Well, oh, it's Friendly. Oh, and it says Newton's first law test. Well, let's make sure he gets this information. Okay, item analysis, then this is an item analysis of the multiple choice and the free response. As you can imagine, it tells me the number of students who omitted, the number of students who got it wrong or right, also as percentages of the total, and then the average number of points on each part versus the total. So again, this is supposed to be engineered so that you can just push Control P and bam, you're ready to print super easy. Okay, now this is the part that you're probably the most interested in. How do I give my students their corrections tasks, right? How do I give them the thing that's like if you got them almost all right, you only have a couple of tasks to do, but if you got almost all wrong, then they have a lot to do, right? Well, that's what's going on here with this thing called print corrections, and it's really awkward. I apologize. So if this is set to 0, it will not generate corrections, and you need it to be set to 0 before you even start inputting into the document. It says over on instructions, you know, make sure the number on the print corrections is set to 0. If you don't do that, then it keeps recalculating everybody's corrections every time you type anything, and that really slows everything down. So leave it at 0. Now, now we're ready to print somebody's correction. So you can type in like any number between 1 and 200. Well, where's the numbers 1 and 200 come from? Well, that's these numbers right here. So student number 1 is Jake. Student number 2 is Annie. And student number 117 is Prescott, right? Okay, so watch what happens here. So you can either type the number 1, oops, print corrections, type the number 1 and push enter, and there's Jake's corrections. Or you can push the up arrow. I know it's really small and I couldn't make it any better than this. It's not my fault, but you can do this. See, that's each student's corrections right here. Here's the problem. This is a big problem. So are you paying attention to the big problem? The problem is that each of these corrections tasks are like 4 or 5 lines long. Look how that sentence is cut off. The force required to lift the same. Where's the rest of the task? It's word wrapped, but Excel doesn't make the cell bigger so you can see it all. So here's my workaround for that. Are you paying attention? I'm going to open up a new Word document. I'm going to open up a new Word document. I pray it actually opens. See if I can get a Word document open here. Okay, blank document. Blank document. Okay. Well, I clicked too many times and now I'm paying the price for that. Okay, come on. Just a Word document. Okay, so here's a blank Word document. Watch. I'm going to go to layout. You need the margins to be half an inch or less in order for this to work really nice. So set the margins to half an inch. Okay. Now back to the spreadsheet. Okay, I'm going to get back to the spreadsheet eventually. Here's a spreadsheet. Copy all of this, select it all, copy, Control C, come over here, paste, then print it. Right, I just printed Jake's corrections. Now, and you notice they all appear. They're all there. The cells are bigger for Word because Word does what Excel doesn't do. Now I'm going to do this. I'm going to push Control Z. Now it's gone. Why would I make it be gone? So that I can do Annie's corrections. Okay, now here's Annie's corrections. Print Annie's corrections. So you have to get an industrial process going. Okay, I'm sorry, it takes a while. This whole process would after grading. So not including the actual Control Z, Control V for paste. Oh, look at this. It goes on to 2 pages, right? So I'm going to print front and back, and I'm just going to make sure that a cell doesn't get cut off by the page break. Sometimes it does. I'll show you what happens when that happens. So this whole process, not including the actual grading of your tests, probably going to take you an extra hour or maybe an extra planning period if you have hour-long planning periods. Now, the benefit is that students can take these corrections home. Students can take these corrections home. I'm trying to look for one. Okay, let me come over to this other one. This one is substantially bigger because it's a practice exam. Okay. So can I find one where there's more than one page? Yeah, that'll definitely be more than one page. Okay. So let me come back to here. And then, okay, look at number 25 here. Two students sit facing each other on a long fractal. The cart rolls along the surface. See, it comes over to the next page. That can be confusing for students. So I'm going to go to the one before it. And I'm just going to push enter a couple of times. Okay, let's look right here. The collision is elastic. Okay, so it doesn't bleed over. All right, so again, take an hour, Control P, okay, print, right? Um, okay, so the idea is that they can take this home. Now, let me tell you about the numbering of the corrections. The number one on the corrections does not correspond to multiple choice number one on the test. Number two on the corrections does not correspond to number two on the test because if it did, then a student could take this home, make a copy of it, hand it off to next year, and now students know what number one's going to be about, what number two is going to be about. Instead, number one is the correction that was assigned to the most students of this whole spreadsheet. Number two was assigned to the second most number of students. Number three, number four, number five, number six. Notice that number eight is missing because Jake got whatever number eight is correct. So he didn't get assigned that corrections task. All right, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So he missed a lot of these. Oh, no 15 or 16. He got those right. So number one, most students will have number one. And second most students will have number two. And then third most students will have number three. And then correction number 65, I think was this one had 65 possible corrections on it, is the least number of students will have that. And why is it that way? It's that way because it makes it easier for students to collaborate together. When they sit down together, hey, oh, we all have number one. Let's all work on number one together. Hey, we all have number two. And then as they get closer and closer to the end, well, I don't actually have number 37. Do you? No, you have to, well, maybe you two can work. Well, let's look at the number 37. Oh, I can help you with number 37, right? So it's to facilitate easier collaboration. So it has their name on it. It has the name of the test. It has the number of tasks. And the reason why it has the number of tasks is because you can easily, sometimes what happens is that the student won't know how to do a task. So they won't actually include it on the corrections. And they might think, ooh, well, if I only correct 25 and I was supposed to correct 34, maybe the teacher won't actually count notice. So, and then it tells you the number of pages. So here's my procedure. My procedure is I hand each of these corrections pages back to the student individually as they're walking in or whatever. And then I have a pile of the corrections pages, right? I have a pile of these things, whichever one I choose. I always choose the six on a page. And so what they do, what the student does, is they look and they're like, oh, I got to get six. They walk up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm handing these out. And as I hand them out, they look at the number they need and they go pick it out, right? It tells them the grade that they got before the curve and they can get up to, it will always say up to, because if they don't do all the corrections, then I'm going to give them something. If they do half the corrections, I might give them a third of the points, so what's a third between 82 and 90? So if they did half, I might give them an 85. And if they did three quarters, I might give them halfway, right? I want it to be complete. So I'm not super generous. Anyway, so that's it pretty much right there. For the last page is called data, and you should stay away from it because it's where it does all the processing that it needs to do. So what you see now is that you can put in names and answers and corrections tasks. The corrections tasks cannot take any formatting. They cannot take any special characters. So just be aware that whatever you do for corrections tasks, there's no pictures. The formulas are going to not be very good because there are what you can type into an Excel sheet, right? I'm trying to find one that might actually have a formula in it. You know, oh, there you go. The acceleration is measured to be 10 plus or minus 1 meter. Look at how awkwardly that's typeset, but that's the way it is. Oh, here we go. F1 equals X, F2 equals X squared over 2, and F3 equals SQRT for square root of 2X, right? Graph those or whatever and then answer a question about them. So it's kind of awkward. There's no subscripts. I think I just saw one that had an ugly subscript, like it's V naught, and it was really ugly. But you get the idea that that it's not going to look as good. Oh, there it is right there, V naught, where the O can't be small. But the idea is the corrections pages will not look as pretty as your test is in terms of typesetting. No pictures, you have to describe anything to them. But um, it's some this is as easy user friendly as I can make it. So try it. I hope that it will become easy for you to use as you do it, and I hope that it will become something that will improve your learning outcomes and make remediation easier for you and more accessible to your students. Drop me a line at my email address, which, where am I going to put that where you can see it? If you don't know it already, john.frensley@gmail.com. If you have any questions or just give me feedback on this thing. All right. See you next time.